Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and Tim, and you're recording a fossil deck profile. So you guys have been requesting this one like crazy on the channel, asking me when I was actually going to record one, but I wanted to take some time and actually come up with some crazy text for you guys, because this is a relatively as pure as possible fossil deck profile to show you guys how you can actually work with a pretty much pure deck with some really good tech cards. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because we have some awesome rewards for you guys, like getting your name description for every single video, getting a signed card sent to the mail, or even getting requested deck profile just like this one with a test hand included every single month that you are a patron. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Withering Soldier. So when you're using this card, it's kind of like an engine card. I can see it being at 2, but in this particular build, you really need it at 3 because you're focusing solely on getting out your copies of your Fossil Fusion monster. So what this card does is if this card is destroyed, battle, or sent to the graveyard by a card effect, then you can add a Fossil Fusion or one particular card that lists Fossil Fusion from your deck to your hand, and you can only use this effect once per turn. It also has the ability that once per turn during your end phase, this card loses 600 attack, which kind of sucks, but it being a 2k body when it's summoned is pretty good and helps you OTK, and it being a rock monster, which is the main theme of the deck. We then play 2 copies of Primaterial Congrate. Primaterial Congrate is a really good card in here and helps us go in for our Fossil Warrior Skull King. It really helps out going for Skull King. And it has the ability that it cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from your hand by a card effect. And if a monster is sent from your opponent's hand and or deck to the graveyard, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand in face down defense position. And if this card is flipped face up, you destroy 2 cards, up to 2 cards on the field, which is really, really cool. It actually comes into play sometimes where you can actually legitimately summon this card onto your side of the field, which is insanely cool. And it's really easy to get it into the graveyard so you can use it for your copy of Fossil Warrior Skull King. I tried to consistently keep with a rock archetype where you'd have rock monsters in this deck to be able to go into. If you don't have Withering Soldier in the graveyard, you can also use your other rock monsters as well. We then play 3 copies of my personal tech card, which you guys will see it in the test hand, because I will be doing test hands of this. But it's going to be 3 of this card. So I want you guys to comment down below. It's a really insane tech card that I've included in this deck that I don't think anybody else has really thought about. And I'm really excited to show you guys. So comment down below and tell me what you think it is. And I'm going to reveal it in 3, 2, 1. And definitely like, comment, subscribe, guys. So here we go. This is my insane tech card for fossils. And that is 3 copies of Morphing Jar number 2. So you might be wondering, what in the world is this man playing Morphing Jar number 2? This card went to 3, from ban to 3, and nobody's batted an eye. And I think a lot of people have forgot that this card went to 3. But what this card does is when it's flipped face up, you shuffle all monsters on the field into the deck, and each player reveals cards from the top of their deck until they reveal the same number of monsters they shuffled into the main deck. And then you special summon all revealed level 4 or lower monsters in face down defense. And you send the remaining cards to the graveyard. Now, why is that good? Well, it's good for us because it board wipes our opponent, it throws the opponent off guard, and if you get pushed to go first, you have plenty of ways to go first. Now, this is an OTK base deck, and I don't mind going first because I play stuff like Torrential Tribute and Morphing Jar number 2 in this deck. But the reason Morphing Jar number 2 is so good in this deck is because it triggers a lot of your different cards when they're sent to the graveyard. Like, it will activate where it makes your Miracle Rupture. When you activate this, if you send a graveyard off the Morphing Jar number 2, you're in your Fossil Fusions in the graveyard, then you get to draw a card off your Miracle Rupture. It also has a really neat interaction with Primaterial Congrate where it sends it to the graveyard, but if you have one in your hand and cards were sent from your opponent's deck to the graveyard, you can special summon Primaterial Congrate from your hand in face down defense, which is really cool, which goes along with the next card, which is Morphing Jar. So if your opponent sends cards from their hand to the graveyard and they have a monster that was in their hand and you draw your 5 cards, after it resolves, the chain resolves, and you draw Primaterial Congrate, Congrate's effect will trigger setting itself to your side of the field, which is really cool interaction between the jars and Congrate. So just a cool little interaction for you guys. We then play 3 copies of Mathematician because you're trying to get your Withering Soldier to the graveyard as quickly as possible so you can resolve its effect to be able to go off and get your copies of Fossil Fusion. And just by normal summoning this card, you're setting up your graveyard with Withering Soldier because you're normal summoning out the Mathematician, send the Withering Soldier to the graveyard, search Fossil Fusion or Miracle Rupture, and then immediately get your play going from there. We then play a single copy of Dolgaran. Dolgaran's really good in here because it's a kaiju, and you use kaijus in this deck as well. 2 copies of the multi-dimensional kaiju. I feel like this one's really good in here too because a lot of your monsters can beat over it. 2 copies of Gamma Seal. Gamma Seal is again really good. And you want to summon the multi-dimensional to your side of the field and the Gamma Seal to your opponent's side of the field, and then it goes to your graveyard during battle phase when you beat over it. And then you can also use its effect to go into your Skull King. Skull King's a big thing that you're usually going for. We then play 2 copies of Nibiru, continuing with the rock archetype. And then we play 3 copies of Ash Blossom as well as 3 other hand traps that just help you settle in with stopping your opponent from everything. With the kaijus and your copies of Nibiru, your opponent's not going to summon anything that's really big. And plus, if you shuffle stuff back with Morphing Jar, it's really, really fun to shuffle your kaijus back into your deck to make them live again. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. And definitely let me know what you think of those Morphing Jar techs that we're playing in this deck. It's kind of like Empty Jar Fossil. We then play 3 copies of Call by the Grave. The 3 Call by the Graves just essentially help us by stopping our opponent from using hand traps against us, because you will be sending stuff from deck to graveyard quite frequently. We play 3 copies of Fossil Fusion. Fossil Fusion is the main card of the deck that you're going to be trying to get to as quickly as possible. And this card's kind of like Invocation in a way, if you guys don't know what Invocation does. It basically lets you banish materials from the graveyard to fusion summon. So what this card does is it lets you fusion summon a Fossil Fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing materials listed on that card from any graveyard. Also, it has the ability that... except for the materials with a graveyard specific requirement. So like some of your graveyard, like some of your Fossil Fusions will specifically list, say, hey, it has to come from your opponent's graveyard. Like I think it's your Yugioh. That one has to come from your opponent's graveyard. It has to be a level 7 or higher from your opponent's graveyard. So you have to use it that way. And if you banish monsters from both players' graveyard, neither player can target the special summon monster with card effects. And if a face-up Fossil Fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or by card effect, while this card's in your graveyard, you get to add it back to your hand as well. And you can only use that effect once per turn. Now, the reason you play it at 3 is because you want to open it. And if you open it, then your copy of what's it called? The copy Withering Soldier essentially turns into a Miracle Rupture Searcher or a Time Stream Searcher, which is really nice. We then play 3 copies of Miracle Rupture. Miracle Rupture is insanely good in this deck too. What this card does is it's essentially Foolish Burial for rock monsters. It lets you send a rock monster that's level 4 or lower from your deck to the graveyard. And then if you have Fossil Fusion in your graveyard, you also get to draw a card, which is really cool. And plus it's got Giant Soldier of Stone on it. Why wouldn't you play this card? We then play 2 copies of Time Stream. Time Stream is really good because it basically lets you level up your monsters. You get to target, like if I have on my side of the field, the best way to show you guys this is actually showing you what it does. Is like if I have Fossil Warrior Skullbone on my side of the field and I activate Time Stream, I target the Skullbone and immediately upgrade it into a copy of Skull Knight. And then if I have another one, I can use it on Skull Knight to go into Skull King. So you essentially get to upgrade through them by going up by 2 stars every time you upgrade off of your monsters, which is really, really cool. I like that ability. It's really neat to be able to kind of step up and walk up the stars instead of having to fusion summon, because a lot of your fossil monsters, fusion monsters, they have effects on the graveyard as well, which we'll go over in a minute. And also this card has the ability that during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card and a fossil fusion monster from your graveyard, and then target a fossil fusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it, which you're going to usually have 2 in your graveyard if you use Time Stream. It basically protects it, so you're going to get one of them back. We then play 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Kaiju Slumber is really, really cool because this card just helps out the deck to board wipe your opponent so you can go in for OTKs. And it's just an overall really good card to just bait your opponent when you're trying to special summon out your Kaijus and just board wipe and break a board. We then play 1 copy of Fossil Fusion, or not Fossil Fusion, but Foolish Burial. I saw the F and I was like, oh, Fossil Fusion. No. Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is essentially like another Miracle Rupture, but you can send anything to graveyard. So it can help you go into Skull King if you're trying to send something like a Nibiru, if you're trying to send something like a copy of one of your Kaijus or something like that to get your specific level, so you can go into your Skull King. It just helps out to go that far and have extra cards to send to the graveyard, because this deck is all about graveyard effects. So that's it for the spells. Let's get into the traps that we play, because we do play 3 traps in this deck, and that is 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. The 3 Torrential Tribute come in really, really handy because they just board wipe again. They kind of catch your opponent off guard. If you have another card that you want to play in here, like 3 Impermanents or something like that, you can change these out, but I like the 3 Impermanents because you have so many board wipes in this deck, it's insane. This activates, like, if you use a jar card and then your opponent special summons monsters back, you can chain and then blow board if you didn't get anything, which is kind of cool. I like that interaction because they summoned something, which is why I like to play this. So you essentially board wipe them once, and then if they get something off of the Morphing Jar number 2, you essentially just board wipe them again. So they're like, oh, I get free monsters. No, you don't. Torrential. So it's really neat to be able to use this card interaction with the cards, because you play 3 of these, you play the 3 jars, which is 6 board wipes, and then you play the 3 copies of Kaiju Slumber. So you essentially play 9 board wipes in here to get through your opponent's field. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Fossil Warrior Skull King. Skull King is really good in this deck. It can attack twice and inflicts piercing damage, and it's really, really good. It also has the ability that during your opponent's turn, quick effect, you can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and discard a card, and if you do, special summon that monster to your field, which is insanely good. I mean, this card is just bonkers good. Like, you really want to get this card out on your field as quickly as possible. We then play a single copy of Fossil Dragon Yugioh. This card is really, really big. It's an OTK maker on diesel fuel. Like, it reminds me of Blue Eyes Chaos Max, because what it does is it must be summoned with Fossil Fusion, and you have to use an opponent's monster that's level 7 or higher in their graveyard. So it's kind of rare. That's why you play it as a 1-of. But you can switch the current attack and defense of your opponent's monsters until the end phase or into the damage step if this card attacks. And if this card inflicts or attacks a defense solution monster, you inflict piercing damage. And if this fusion summon card battles an opponent's monster, you inflict double damage, which is really cool. So double piercing, Chaos Max. We then play a single copy of Skull King, Skull Knight. Skull Knight's alright. It was the short printed card of the set, but you just really need 1 of it, so I just play it as a 1-of. You use it as a stepping stone, really, to go from a 4 to a 6 to an 8. So it's just basically here for time stream, and so I just think it's a good 1-of. I probably wouldn't play it any more than 1. In playtesting, I think I summoned it like 2 or 3 times, but I never summoned it more than once in a duel, so I just played it at 1. But it must be fusion summoned Fossil Fusion and inflicts piercing damage. I think they all inflict piercing damage, if I remember correctly. They all do piercing damage, and when this card, attacking card, destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can activate the effect to make this card be able to attack again in a row. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard to target 1 monster on the field and destroy it, which is really good. We played 2 copies of Fossil Dragon Skullgar. Skullgar makes you use a monster in your opponent's graveyard to summon Skullgar. But what this card does is it inflicts piercing damage as well, and it also has the ability that you can banish it from your graveyard to add a Fossil Fusion from your deck to your hand, which is really good. We played 2 copies of Skullbone, or Fossil Warrior Skullbone. I really like Skullbone. It probably has the wickedest artwork out of them all. I love the way that they made these cards look. But this card can attack twice, which is really cool during each battle phase, and also you can banish from your graveyard to add a time stream from your deck to your hand, which is really good. We play a single copy of Access Code Talker just to be able to help us pop cards on the field. You don't have to play Access Code Talker if you don't want to. You can play something, if you're trying to go a little bit more budget, you can play like Boral Load or something like that. 1 copy of Unicorn just to bounce stuff, Phoenix to pop spells and traps, Mrs. Radiant because it's essentially an entire Earth deck except for the Kaijus, so it's pretty easy to go in for Mrs. Radiant, and it boosts all of your fossil monsters by 500. Cross Sheep because you're fusion summoning so much, and being able to special summon your rocks back from the graveyard is super nice. Gallant Granite, I mean, it is a rock deck, so why not? And then we play number 60 because it can double the attack points of your Skull King and may be able to attack twice, so you're double attacking. So it's essentially like he's getting 4 times the damage because you're being able to attack twice with double damage, which is really good. Or if you go in for the Skull Dragon and you double its attack point, then it goes to 7,000, and then you attack your opponent for 7k. I mean, it's pretty potent. I mean, the deck is pretty potent. So, anyways, guys, that's it for the deck. I hope you did enjoy it. Be on the lookout for test hands, because I'm going to do some test hands of this deck. It will probably be, to be honest with you, probably be a lot of set Morphing Jar pass. Flip Morphing Jar, show you guys what it actually does. and then summoning out a bunch of fossil fusion monsters, which is really fun. I really want to do some live duels with this particular build because I think it'll be a lot of fun. And be on the lookout for some more fossil builds because there will be a lot of them on the channel. I mean, I love fusion engines that you can throw into stuff. Like Shadow's is probably my favorite engine, and this deck reminds me of Shadow's and Invoked. So, I mean, maybe I'll do like Shadow Fossil Dyna. I don't know. But anyways, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell there so you can become part of the notification squad. Definitely tell me what you think of this video down in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.